Hello, KINES 5 students, and welcome to week 6 of Sport and Society. Last week, we took a deep dive into Jesse Owens, and I hope you enjoyed learning about Jesse Owens. He was an unbelievable individual in history, and especially in sports history. But he was an influential figure of his time. And unfortunately, as the story goes and the story unfolds, all the admiration, all the uh, cheers and pats on the back when he was winning gold medals pretty quickly went away when he came back to the United States after that Olympics. And he was faced with the harsh reality of living in a Black America once again, with the same types of hurdles and same types of oppression that he had dealt with his whole life, despite what he'd done for our country. So, when you think about all these people cheering for you because they're proud for USA, and then you come home and none of those people will give you a job or a loan for a house or a loan to start a business, you really, it's an eye opener. And, as we look back, despite the way Jesse Owens' story ended, his legacy lives on even today. And I think he has brought hope to many African American athletes over the years to inspire them, give them strength, give them courage, show them that it can be done despite all odds. And just an unbelievable person. And so there's a couple of movies about Jesse Owens that are very good. And I would recommend, if you were interested in his story and want to know more about it, check out some of those movies, because it's pretty amazing. There's lots of great footage, and you can really see what kind of athlete he was, and what a class act, and just an unbelievable person. So, as Jesse Owens, like I said, despite his setbacks after he got back and the reality of what it was like to live in the United States as an African-American person, they were still breaking down the barriers. Jesse Owens was instrumental in just providing, like I said, hope for other athletes. And so athletes were starting to break in, and the color barrier was starting to be broken in different sports, and they kind of all have different timelines, but you were starting to see more and more African American athletes playing at the highest levels and given opportunities to play at the highest levels. And in this era that we're going to be studying this week, the 40s to the 50s, there were some great accomplishments in terms of the influence of sport on society. And the person that you guys are going to study this week was one of the biggest, greatest influences of his time, and like Jesse Owens, was a barnstormer, a trailblazer to pave the path for other African American athletes to break through and get across the color barrier. And Jackie Robinson, if you have not seen his movie, he was a pretty unbelievable person. And so I'm not going to say a whole lot about him, other than he was the first African American player in the major leagues. Played for the Brooklyn Dodgers, and it was a big deal. At the time, there were Negro leagues, and there was always arguments on who would win in a game, a Major League Baseball team that's all white or a team from the Negro leagues. And Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier and kind of opened the floodgates for African Americans to start playing Major League Baseball and have opportunities. So I'm not going to say much more about him, because the assignment is to study him. So, and we'll talk about him a little more in our next lecture. Other athletes at this time, white and Black, male and female, we're also starting to break into the endorsement side of sports. And this is a whole nother aspect of how sport can influence society. Starting with Honus Wagner, gotta love the last name. Honus Wagner had sponsors for tobacco companies. And he's got the famous baseball card that everybody talks about that is kind of the jewel of all jewels, that's worth over $3 million for one baseball card from him. But he started to receive endorsements. Babe Didrikson, who was the epitome of an athlete, All-American basketball player, two-time Olympic gold medalist in track and field, co-founder of the LPGA, 14 consecutive tournament wins, which is still a record. She began to work for Dodge. She began to, all of a sudden you saw her on the box of Wheaties. You started to see her get endorsements. And so female athletes, white athletes, black athletes, were starting to have opportunities now to make some money outside their sport. Professional athletes didn't make very much money back in those days. They made very little. And most professional athletes had jobs in the off season and sometimes even during the season. And so a way to make more money was really, would allow them to train more, possibly, not have to work as much, maybe more time with their family. Lots of things that could have come out of that. But they were sought out by sporting goods companies. They were sought out by automobiles companies, and our country's infatuation with tobacco and alcohol, that's really big business. And so you started to see athletes getting endorsements for some pretty they're kind of comical when we look back at them. And I'm going to share my screen here and share a few of these with you. Let's see here. Okay, so as we look here, more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. How about that? And so as you look at some of these ads, they're kind of amazing. They're promoting a healthy lifestyle with Hamm's beer and Camel cigarettes. And we even see Willie Mays with some Chesterfields right here. And 21 out of 23 giant world champions smoke Camels. Here's Babe Didrikson in an ad with her endorsements way back in the day. How many of these great football players can you name? They all smoke Marlboros. I love this one in the gear in the locker room, smoking a cigarette. And it was common to see athletes smoke in the dugouts, athletes smoke in the locker rooms. It was interesting. Alcohol and tobacco have always kind of went hand in hand until recent years, where they were deemed so harmful that they started banning certain things. And really, people were worried about their image. Nowadays, image is everything and your brand is everything as an athlete. And so these things that were totally acceptable back in the day, you would not see. Well, I have not seen in my lifetime professional athletes being endorsed by cigarette companies. I have seen some with alcohol companies, but it's amazing to see all the athletes here with cigarettes in their mouths. Chesterfield obviously was a big company back in those days. But as we look here, we see Jackie Robinson, even Chesterfields. And whether all these athletes smoke these cigarettes or not, who knows? Because when you look at endorsements today, you never know if those people really use those products. And so, but they endorse them and they get paid for it. And it was a way for professional athletes not only to gain money, but it was also to gain exposure. As people started getting familiar with their faces, they become household names. All of a sudden, if they're signing a new contract, they've got a little more power in negotiating, because they're a known name. They're a name that people are going to want to come and see play baseball or play football or play basketball. And so these were really important in the history of sport and in the relationship that sport has in society. You see that the floodgates kind of open up in all these different avenues, and athletes have been really, I think, they've done a good job over the years of capitalizing on these opportunities and these moments in time where their name is the hot item, and they're able to cash in on that, because every athlete that's ever played and every coach that's ever coached will tell you that at some point the playing days end, and then what are you going to do? And so back in those days, it was common that a lot of professional athletes became very poor after they were done playing, because they didn't really make a living, and their bodies were so broken down, especially NFL players. Their bodies were so broken down after playing, they really couldn't do much in terms of work. And so these endorsement deals and different ways to make money and was really important for lots of reasons for athletes back in that time. But it also, being a household name, there's lots of other things that come with that. You look at somebody like Ronald Reagan, for example. Ronald Reagan was a football player in college, was a very good football player in college. And then he was an actor and made some movies, and everyone knew who Ronald Reagan was. And even though he did not have a background in politics, he was able to make a run and get all the way to the presidency. And that started with being a known name through his athletics, through the movie stuff. And we see athletes today that take that same road. We've seen college football coaches get into politics. We've seen ex-NFL players, ex-Major League Baseball players get into politics. And they've used sports as that access point to get in there. And when you start getting access points at those levels in politics, then you now have a seat at the table of influence, in my opinion. Now you whether you're a minority or not, you're at the table, and you can chip away, and you can start to have influence, and you can have a part or a role in change and changing people's perspective, because many times stereotypes and lack of people being around different types of people, they create all these weird ideas in your head, and sometimes it just takes meeting somebody and having a conversation, or seeing somebody doing their job and doing a great job at it, that changes perspectives. If you have never met somebody from a certain country, you have all these unknowns, and it might be easy for you to believe something that somebody told you about those people, and you might say, wow, that's, but you don't know any better. And it takes meeting somebody or seeing somebody or having exposure to different types of people to get that different perspective, or to have a chance to change your perspective. And so these access points that athletes were starting to obtain were absolutely crucial, and played a huge role in the impact of sport on society. And as we start getting into, next week, we're going to be starting with the 60s, which was a wild time for a lot of reasons, but it was a very it was a time when people were challenging things, and people were tired of the status quo, and people were demanding different things, and athletes played such a huge role in the 60s, and it's really a great era to study, because there's so many heroes from just all walks that did great things and influenced society to help make change. And as that was happening, endorsement deals started growing. And I think you guys would be surprised to know, if this was a live class, I would give an extra credit to somebody that could name the first professional athlete that had $1 million endorsement deal. And I'm embarrassed to say I can't remember his name, but he was a bowler. And so even in bowling, You know, there's money to be made, and there's access to a chance at a better life, and a chance at better opportunities, maybe, or a better seat at the table with better perspective. So as we move through this relationship, you're going to see continuing patterns. You're going to see, obviously, race has been hugely impacted by sport, gender hugely impacted, and I mean in their regards to what's happening in society. But now we're starting to see sporting goods, food products, cigarettes, beer, whiskey, automobiles, and then which led the way to tennis shoes and apparel, and you know, and to where we are now. And so there's some really awesome movements that athletes have gotten involved with, as they started to organize. And I think that's kind of what happened, in my opinion, in the 50s and 60s. Athletes started to get more organized, and they started to develop, you know, they would develop groups of people that could go advocate and for them. And as they became more organized, more progress started to happen in the areas that athletes were really getting involved in. And as we see that organization start to begin, and get stronger and stronger, there's going to be some great events we're going to talk about, and some great people coming up. But this week, we're, like I said, we're finishing up with the 40s and the 50s, 40s to the 50s. And I hope that you guys will enjoy learning about our hero this week. And reminders to all of you, you know, there's a lot of you missing assignments right now. I will accept assignments late. My goal is that all you guys get through this class with an A. And to do that, you have to do the work. And so we're going to have an assignment each week. And if you have all those assignments in and they're done the way I asked you to do them, then you're going to get a very good grade in this class. And so I'd like to see everybody get a good grade. So those of you that may have fallen behind and you're feeling uncomfortable, you got this weird, like, man, I haven't turned in weeks 1, 2, or 3, and all of a sudden I'm going to just turn in week 6, or whatever you're thinking, send me your stuff so we can get you caught up. Okay. And if you're having troubles connecting, the easiest way to get me is through just my normal email at lwagner@santarosa.edu. And if you're not receiving my weekly emails, then this message to you is pointless. So I shouldn't say get a hold of me if you're not receiving these emails. So anyway, I hope that you guys have a great weekend, and I hope that you watch some sports and you start thinking about these things that have been going on for a long, long time, and how they still relate today, and they're still relative to the things that are happening in society right now. It's kind of amazing. So enjoy your week. Hopefully you enjoyed the lecture, and you'll enjoy the information for this week. I have some links for you, and this week's assignment is typical to last week's assignment. We're talking about a great person that influenced during the era that we're studying, and so there's tons of information about this guy, and even movies and books, and so I hope you'll enjoy learning about him, and we will see you next week. Have a great day. Bye-bye.